Hi, my name's Barry Kent, and I'd like to tell you how fishing flies have guided and totally changed my life from when I was born and brought up in London, England. I was born in the southern suburbs of London, England, and my first fishing experiences were, I had a paper round in the next town. I lived in Tooting Bec, and I had a paper round as a 13, 14-year-old in the next town of Balham, and I used to cycle across the local common, which is a park in London, common land, and as a shortcut to get to the paper shop to do my paper round. But there was a lake in the middle of the common, and the fishing season in Britain has a closed season. The winter they close for what they call coarse fishing, for roach and dace and tench and whatever. And prior to the season opening, which was normally back then in April the 1st, I would cycle across the common at like 4:30 in the morning and throw bread in what they call a swim in the lake, which is you ground bait the area in a large space, in a large area, and over a week period you slowly reduce that circle of ground baiting bread and corn and whatever, so that you have, by the end of about a week, you have a concentration. If nobody else is fishing the lake, you have a concentration of fish in that one spot. And it was like a secret, because I was doing this at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and that's how my fishing started back in England. Coarse fishing with a float and worms and that sort of stuff. But then, you know, to cut a long story short, I started college in a town called Croydon. Used to catch a bus from my hometown to Croydon one day a week to Croydon College of Art, and where I got off of the bus, there was a West Croydon, there was a tackle shop there called Angler's Corner, and I would always gaze in the window, and there were a lot of fishing flies in the window, and they just spellbound me. I was spellbound by these little things. So I, you know, eventually drummed up enough courage to go in there and ask the tackle shop owner about these fishing flies, and I'd like to try and make them. And I asked him if I could buy a Veniard, which is was back then the premier supplier of fly tying materials in Europe, a Veniard fly tying kit. Remember, it was £5 and it had everything, a vice, feathers. But Bob, the old man that ran the tackle shop, said, you really don't want to buy that. I can give you twice as much material loose for less money. So, you know, I did that. He almost on the turn, when I bought all of that material and tools to start tying flies, because remember, I knew nothing about tying flies back then, he offered to for me to go over to his house, because on Tuesday evenings during the winter months, when the trout season was closed, they would sit and tie flies at his house on Tuesday nights. So that's where my first fly tying experience happened. I was actually tying flies before I ever cast a single one to a trout. And Bob was the guy that took me out for my very first ever fly fishing adventure to a Weirwood Reservoir in the southern part of England. The water supply reservoirs, this happened just after the Second World War. The local authorities realized that the water reservoirs that were built to supply water to the towns were stockable with trout. So they started stocking them with trout and charging the public to go fish. And that's where this old man, Bob Worrell, took me and we both caught our limit of 8 trout that day on flies that we tied through the winter months. After my apprenticeship was over, I had itchy feet. I was chasing sunshine and girls and trout with a fly rod, and I ended up leaving England and going to South Africa, still in the graphics, typography, printing business, but I immediately went to the local tackle shop in Johannesburg. It's called Rosettenstein's. It was pretty famous back then, and struck up a friendship with the father and son of that tackle shop, and started tying flies for them commercially. The most popular fly in South Africa, by far, probably 80% of the fishermen fish a fly called a Walker's Killer, and I started tying flies, Walker's Killers for Rosettenstein. And then a few friends showed interest, and we started an evening fly tying class, and by that stage I was now freelancing graphic art. This is pre-computer era. I used to do a lot of hands-on airbrushing artwork, and a lot of paste up artwork for print. I had my own office. The gentleman in the next office to mine, a chap called Alan Gadd, he was like an entrepreneur type, came into my office one lunchtime, and I was busy tying the flies for that evening's fly tying class, and as he came in the door, the feathers blew all over the place, and we started joking, and I said to Alan, there is a potential industry in these fishing flies. And his ears kind of perked up. He was the type of guy that always carried a calculator in his pocket like a 6-gun, and he came out and he said, how much are the hooks, what equipment do you need, you know. And that was in February 1976. By October 1976, he had negotiated as his partner with the South African government and the Transkei Development Corporation to have a purpose-built factory built for my fly tying business, our fly tying business. High Flies opened its doors October 1976. We started training. It was a 6-month training process. We interviewed literally hundreds and hundreds of local women for 30 key positions. They would become eventually supervisors of other fly tyers, and the training started. So by the time at the end of the training period, we probably lost half of that 30, but we had a core of 15 trained fly tyers, and we brought in 2 new employees to be trained by the supervisors, and that's how we slowly grew the factory. And within 3 years we were employing 360 local African women in Butterworth, Transkei, producing 1,000 dozen flies a day, exporting them throughout the world. I would travel to Europe and to Canada, North America, twice a year to tackle shows, and our customers, which were major wholesalers in the fish and tackle industry, taking orders for fishing flies. One of the visits we attended, and we were an exhibitor at the AFTMA, American Federation of Tackle Manufacturers, show in Dallas, Texas in 1979. I built the booth in my garage in Africa, and had it shipped to Dallas, Texas. And we put this sucker up. It was 12 feet long, concertina style, with our products, because by the time we got to that stage, we were doing you know, associated products like fly tying kits and materials. We were repackaging and selling fly tying materials, and we were honoured by having the best product presentation on at the show, and that was really amazed me, because there were the major tackle manufacturers of the world there. Daiwa had a 2-story booth. They had a cocktail lounge upstairs to their booth, and Shakespeare and just all the famous tackle manufacturers in the world were at the show. And Little High Flies, you know, got an award for product presentation. Life led me to Panama City, Florida. One of the very first things I checked before I moved here was, where is the fly club? Where's the fly fishing club? And there wasn't one. Apparently there was an older club called St. Andrews Fly Fishing Club, or St. Andrews Bay, I'm not quite sure. But a year ago I started promoting the fact that fly fishers in this area, whether they're saltwater fishermen or freshwater fishermen, that's not important. It's just the sport of fly fishing is so special to me, and the making of fishing flies, that, you know, we needed a club. So we got together about a year ago and started promoting and meeting. The club is still not formally registered as a club. It's just a group of good old boys that get together once a month and tie flies and talk about our fly fishing experiences in saltwater and in freshwater. We've got about 60 interested people on an email list, and we normally have 15 to 20 people at any meeting. Now we have changed our venue, and I think this is a big plus. We now meet once a month at the Boatyard restaurant, tucked behind Captain Anderson's. And I think if we're good boys there and we prove our worth to the Boatyard, he is going to eventually let us go out on the docks at the back of the restaurant and have fly casting lessons, because it would be perfect, especially for a beginner, because the beginner would have water behind him and water in front of him, not grass and water, you know. So we're working on that, but I don't want to be too pushy yet. We've only had one meeting at the boatyard. It's a super place to meet. The first meeting was a huge success. They've given us a private room upstairs, and I think the future of the club is very healthy. It will be very good.